Hello and welcome to Pardon My Disruption. I'm Alan Berkson, the Director of Community Outreach for Fresh Desk, and I'm joined as always by the Dr. Disruptive, Jonathan Yarmis. Welcome, Doctor.
Thank you, Alan. You sound lovely today.
I sound lovely today. I clicked on a bad email and my voice got a virus. We are broadcasting live from the Stamford Innovation Center in beautiful downtown Stamford, Connecticut. It is a sunny day in Stamford today.
And some mornings soon, we're in the middle of May and it's still 42 degrees when I wake up.
It might actually become summer. We are here the third Friday of every month.
We are?
We are here the second Friday of every month.
I guess this is going to be a show. I've got to do some of the leading. And oh, by the way, while we've been here the second Friday of every month, this has the potential for being the last second Friday of every month that we're here in this physical location, because there are a bunch of things that are going on, both with the Innovation Center and with the show, that there's some reasonable likelihood that next month we're doing it from a different location.
Stay tuned. We do have a guest today. It is my cough, and it may join us from time to time, and I apologize in advance.
And there's no cough button on the microphone.
Our next show will be June 9th, so mark your calendars. We've got, wow, a lot of stuff to talk about today. But maybe let's start with talking about one of our favorite topics, which is security.
Yeah, the topic that keeps on giving.
Well, first I want to start off with raise your hand if you were smart enough not to click on that Google Doc phishing scam.
And Google was quick to point out, I think, that only 0.1% of their users did so, but that's one of those things where that means it was still a 6-digit impact, hundreds of thousands of people.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is a public service announcement. If you get an email from somebody you haven't heard from in like 2 years with no context and just something that says open the doc, it's probably not real. Just saying.
And more importantly than that, because sometimes those things happen, and this is one of those unfortunate things when it comes to technology, that I guess there's the old observation, you know, whenever you try and make something idiot-proof, we build a better idiot. Yep. And I'm not calling the dear users of this show idiots. Things that at the end of the day, you need to know about how your computer operates, that if all you do is click on things and type things and don't look at what's going on at the top and bottom of your browser,
yes,
you are exposing yourself.
Yeah, no, the other thing that was interesting is I had one where somebody, because usually what I'll do is I'll reply back to somebody and say, did you send me this? And I got a reply once saying, yes, I did. But it was in broken English. So some of these phishing people are either using automation or they're actually engaging to try to, you know.
Oh, that's kind of one of the interesting things about the Google attack, and it's really the next vector of attacks on the internet. It used to be that what you got was something that I won't say was obviously an attack, but it showed no context and no awareness of who you were. We all got the exact same attack. They are now using information that they've got from all of this hacking to what's referred to as socially engineer these things. So the threshold for you being able to identify it as fake have gone up. It comes from someone you know. It brings you to what looks like an authentic login procedure.
The interesting thing for me there is it's actually diverging, because on one hand you've got, and we've always talked about the fact that criminals are more risk tolerant in terms of using new technology, so they're going to take advantage of it. But so you have the Nigerian scams, which are intentionally bad. I mean, everybody said, who would ever fall for it? They don't want everybody to fall for it. They only want the really stupidest people to fall for it. So they make it intentionally bad. And then you have these, which is it's playing with that social engineering and those habits and trying to customize it to, and constantly innovating in terms of what is going to make somebody actually click on it.
Yeah, but that's also why I said you need to know what's going on. You've got to look at the browser address bar. If you never looked at it before, when you hover over links on a web page, normally in the lower left-hand corner of your browser, you'll see the address that that link is going to
Hovering
take you
over
to.
it. Right.
Yes.
That's the key. Hover, don't click on it. If you hover over it, you see that.
Yeah.
And you do that automatically.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there are things, for instance, there are what are known as link shorteners. You'll see sometimes things like bit.ly, bit.ly is one of the common link shorteners. There's a t.co, there's a goo.gl. Those things oftentimes, the link has been shortened. You don't know where that's leading to.
Or it says google.com.yy.
Yes. Yeah.
Or something like that. So the first thing you see is Google. Oh, it's Google. Okay, good.
Yeah, or there's a news source, nbc.au. This is not NBC News. .au is the suffix for Australia, and it's just somebody in Australia took that domain name, or somebody somewhere took that domain name to make it look like it was NBC. All
right, so bottom line is we need better digital skills for it, because the behavioral engineering behind phishing scams is getting more complex and more and harder to obviously discern.
Yes, we need better engineering, and the weakest link in security is always the user.
But I will
we need
say,
better users.
But I will also say kudos. I know we do kudos again. Kudos to Google for how quickly they were able to not only assess it but put a stop to it.
Yes, and that's increasingly these days that is the mark of a quality vendor, because we all suffer security breaches. There is no such thing as a piece of secure software. I remember having this discussion in the late 90s where I said the only secure system is one that has no users. As soon as you enable the first user, you've exposed a security breach. And so given that oftentimes it's how quickly somebody responds. GE, for instance, had a recent security exposure identified that made the power grid vulnerable. It's a vulnerability that has existed for 8+ years. In fact, it's only on older equipment. And once they were made aware of it, it's like, yeah, this is something that is significant. And they responded immediately. There are other vendors, and I'm not going to name names right now, where their response has been, whatever. Aren't that hip? Whatever.
Are we going to talk about Twitter now? Is that why you're saying whatever? No. All right, let's talk about the president's executive order.
Yes, and this is one of those rare opportunities, to say something favorable about the administration and the executive order. Slightly longer than promised, they released an executive order yesterday about cybersecurity. Now, as is often the case with these things, the executive order is long on platitudes and short on details. And in fact, it's much more a plan for a plan. But the good news is it's a plan for a plan, and this is something that's long overdue. And there are a couple of elements that I think are interesting. One of them is the Obama administration for a period of time had been urging businesses to adopt this NIST, this security framework. But the government was notably absent from participation in said framework. It's, do as I say, not as I do. And the president has required all agencies to identify a plan that says they are going to adhere to these security best practices and so on. And given that a third of governmental agencies suffered a breach in the last year, 2/3 have suffered breaches altogether, and the remaining 1/3 probably haven't discovered yet that they've suffered a breach. That this is a good news. Now, the more interesting thing, and this is one where I don't want to get too wonky when it comes to security, and this is something that applies to everyone. The government has suggested that what we need to do is move to a centralized architecture. That right now the government has something like 195 different entities with their own technology strategy, and that makes securing the infrastructure difficult because you have to have 195 different plans. So instead they've said, let's move to a centralized cloud-based architecture. Now, the reason why this is an interesting discussion is, on the one hand, that sounds very reasonable. Yeah, let's all get on the same platform because we can protect ourselves. On the other hand, there are those in the security community who use this phrase, security by obscurity. That
Right.
If you don't have a single point of contact, any individual breach is likely to be contained.
You're limiting the scope.
Yeah.
Meaning if it's all in one place, you may be able to protect it better, but if they do get in, they get everything.
Yes, and so this is one of those,
Look, enterprises, businesses face the same problem.
Mm-hmm.
You have multiple entities within a large a company, and you've got fiefdoms of security policies and infrastructure policies, and there's risk and there's value.
Yeah, and so this is one, whichever decision the government made, it's either wrong or right. But I think the notion that A, we're having the discussion, B, we're talking about the value of a cloud-based infrastructure, because this is one of those that's also been an interesting debate for a long period of time. Is the cloud more or less secure than an on-premises entity?
I'm going to have to abstain from that conversation.
You're going to recuse yourself?
I'm going to recuse myself. All right. Moving on. So I've written about Twitter. It's one of my favorite products for many reasons.
Not the least of which, that's how we met.
That's true. That's true. And yet we've also heavily criticized it, and we've had some. I've certainly talked about what business I think they should be in. You've certainly talked about it. So we have a milestone.
The user count went up.
The user count went up.
Yeah, they added 9 million active users in the last quarter, which is 7 million more than Wall Street expected.
Are these all people following our president? Is he driving the Twitter's success right now?
Yeah. I think the answer is undeniably there's an effect there. That number one, it's getting the attention. Number two, and we saw evidence of it again this morning, the man makes news on Twitter. The news of the day, he's threatening Jim Comey that there better not be tapes. I mean, this is reality theater at its finest, and if only it were theater. But this is stuff that moves markets, is a fascinating drama. And while this remains Twitter's challenge, in that despite the user count going up, revenue went down again, and that's something they need to deal with. But it gets so much exposure and so many platforms, you start reading it everywhere. I mean, our canary in the coal mine, my mother's always asking, should I be on Twitter? Should I be on Twitter?
Well,
and I continue to say no, but the drumbeat gets louder.
Well, I have this quote that I actually tweeted out earlier this week, and this is from—
Is that kind of recursive?
That Anthony Noto, who's the COO of Twitter, he said, "We'd love it if every world leader used Twitter as their primary method to talk to their constituencies."
It's, on the one hand, that's a scary notion. On the other hand, we are in the midst of a massive transformation. When I wrote the research report in January of 2008, entitled "Twitter, the Most Important Platform You've Never Heard of."
And who did you write that for?
I was at AMR Research at the time.
I need to see that report.
Yeah.
I want to see that report.
Yeah.
I want documentation. I got to
Google it. It's out there. At the very least, I've referred to it. But nonetheless, did I envision this? No. No. Where it is if not the primary platform with which audiences, with people in all forms, can reach audiences. It's transforming the way we govern. It's transforming certain industries. We're both big sports fans. It's transforming the nature of the way athletes relate to their constituencies. Reporters at some level are being marginalized because what do I need the reporter for anymore? I can get to the consumer directly. I can sell them things. I can control the flow of information. And that control of flow of the information and the ability to go through channels that don't have the filters for which we've given the media
but you just made
constitutional protection.
You just made a statement which I think is actually it's the heart of a much bigger conversation, which is, what do we need the reporters for? And the answer is, we don't need reporters. I must have tweeted this out maybe a year or two ago. Hey, reporters, stop trying to be first.
Yeah.
You've lost. Twitter wins.
Or we don't need reporters to report.
We don't need reporters to give us breaking news. There's no such thing as, they're not going to break. What we need is investigative reporting and analysis, more on the former, less on the latter, because we get a lot of analysis.
Yes, and context, and there are a whole bunch of things. That's one of the things in my early days at Gartner we wrestled with. It's like, okay, we're starting to move online. We're not in the instant analysis business. What do we need to do if our customers?
That was Fred. He was in the instant analysis business.
Yes, the current analysis.
Fred McClellan.
But when you want my opinion now, I'm certainly more than happy to give you my opinion now. If you're asking me, what does this mean for the long term? How should I react to that? Now is a bad time to do that. It's funny, I remember some years ago in my Gartner days, I was hosting a conference at which Steve Jobs was the luncheon speaker. Not when he was at Apple, when he was at Next. And he gave a demonstration of the Next machine that to this day may well be the single best demonstration of technology.
It was cool. I've never used it at Wall Street.
Cool technology, and there's nobody better than Steve Jobs at bringing you that Jobsian mind meld. I've seen the future. And afterwards, Gideon Gartner, the founder, CEO of Gartner, came up to me all excited and said, should we be standardizing our company on this? And I said, Gideon, ask me that question tomorrow, because I've just seen Steve Jobs, and if you want an answer right now, the answer is going to be yes. But give me a chance tomorrow to think about that, and I'll come up with the reasons why it's a bad idea.
Well, and you know what? That is the metaphor for what's the challenges that news organizations face. And like I said, that's a much bigger conversation. One of the things that I wanted to get into today, well, first of all, Twitter, blip, new direction. Put on your prognosticator hat. What does this mean?
I think all of the issues we've said that Twitter has in terms of making it a better experience, I am concerned that blip. People have come on, they'll look at it for a couple of minutes and go, interesting, yeesh, too much work, I'm getting all I need from other media sources, I'm over the novelty of it, I don't have good tools to manage it, I don't have ability to make sense of this fire hose.
Right.
And Twitter still hasn't figured out how to make money. That's still the
core problem.
Yep.
Still core problem. All right. Both of us travel a lot. And I know that I like to bring my laptop on the plane with me because it's a good chance to, because I'm live, I'm going to say it's a chance for me to work and get a lot of productivity done. Or it could be watching movies. Actually, I'll usually watch the movies on the plane screen but I do a lot.
Don't get used to that. A lot of the airlines are now delivering seat backs without screens.
Really?
Yeah, BYO.
All right. Well, you know what? Maybe that's okay. But the challenge is my laptop. Yes. Apparently, it's a potentially dangerous device.
And this is one of those things where there was initially a ban from 10 generally Middle Eastern countries where, the rationale was we're afraid that, we've got belief that they're figuring out how to make these things into bombs, and therefore we need to stop letting people carry on.
I think it was really just Samsung lobbying that you can't just be.
Yeah, don't pick on us alone.
Don't just pick on us. Pick on everybody.
Yeah, but there were those, and I admit to being in that camp, who felt at some level, if you're not aware of it, there's a big fight with the Middle East carriers who are being accused by the US carriers of having grossly unfair subsidies, with the net result being that there are a whole bunch of things where today it may not be a big problem, but tomorrow it threatens the financial well-being of American Airlines trying to fly people anywhere into Europe. And if you want an interesting read on it, there's a travel blogger who goes by the name of Cranky Flyer that did a really interesting analysis of what's going on, with the Middle East carriers and the implications it might have for the American carriers. But all that aside, that was a relatively limited impact. But there is belief that as soon as today, we might extend that ban to a number of European countries as well, which puts lie to the notion that it's a just retaliation for the Middle East carriers, and either there's a legitimate threat or there's greater fear mongering, and I'll leave it to your politics to decide because we don't have the evidence on that one. But boy, is that going to have implications that I don't think we can fully appreciate yet on business travel across the pond. There are things where before, if you knew you could be productive on a 7-hour flight, you might be willing to take that trip, where on the margin now, it's like, okay, I can use telecommunications. Do I really need to be there? Do I need to be offline for 7 hours? Or, am I going to take that trip?
You think that's going to have an impact?
As I said, on the margin, I think it will, because there are options. I'm one of those people, I tend to try and do, unlike you, as little as work as possible on an airplane, because it's one of the few places you can be where you can at least pretend to be inaccessible. Oh, the Wi-Fi, I didn't have Wi-Fi on my plane, Wi-Fi was unavailable. I can actually read and watch movies and things like that. So I like it, but I recognize when looking around the cabin that oftentimes I'm the exception, not the rule. There are a lot of people who are doing work on airplanes. And if you're spending... If
you can't Instagram at 20,000 feet, I mean, come on.
You can Facebook though. Yeah. But the bottom line, if you're on an airplane 10, 15 hours a week and can't be productive, that's a significant portion of your work time. And I think there are those people who will look and say, do I want to travel? And the airlines, already the Middle East carriers had some significant impact to their business. So admittedly, that's a marginal case of proving the point. But they had to react by, at least in the premium cabins, making laptops and tablets available to their customers. So you may not be able to bring it on board, but the airline, once you're on board, can give you one.
Or I can take a boat. We're going to see an increase in ocean, transatlantic ocean travel.
Yeah, or yes, I was going to say, or rail travel if this ever becomes a domestic issue.
Right. All right, moving on. One thing we didn't cover last time in F8, if you've been a fan of the show, going back pretty much, I think maybe to the first episode we did together. I feel like we did it over here in that other, I think it was downstairs. There's a concept that you popularized for me. You started, it was a very nascent idea of what you at the time called augmented reality. And you used the term which stuck with me, which is, what if reality were a read-write medium? And that is like, today, if I say—
pause to let people grok that one for a second.
Grok. What if reality were a read-write medium? And but the interesting thing for me is, back then you said augmented reality, and maybe, you know, a tiny handful of people on the planet actually knew what you were talking about. Today
still a tiny people.
No, but particularly after F8 and the fact that, you know, that suddenly this is really, no pun intended, becoming reality.
Yeah, and Pokemon Go might have been the tipping point, you know, where augmented reality entered the consciousness, and that was for gaming purposes, and, you know, some obvious interesting implications there. But Facebook is now saying, you know, augmented reality is on the cusp of being a mainstream capability. And, you know, I started writing about it. I looked for the purpose of the show. The first time I made reference to augmented reality was in 2012.
And when was the last time you made reference to augmented reality?
Yesterday.
In writing.
Oh, in writing.
This is just a poke. You gotta
maybe on a blurb for the show, but nothing post-show. I know. Yes, guilty as charged. Right. But the bottom line, I think, you know, Facebook embracing this as something that's going to be significant, and it's one of those things. There are a couple of ways to look at it. Do not expect this to transform the Facebook experience tomorrow.
Right.
You know, but there are a couple of things. You know, one, my old Gartner days, we talked about the hype cycle, and you go through what is known as the peak of inflated expectations, where this is going to solve every problem known to mankind. You know, health, wealth, you know, happiness, you name it. And then when it doesn't happen by a week from Tuesday, people say, oh, it's never going to happen. It failed to meet expectations. This is never going to work. And we enter what is known as the trough of disillusionment. You know, at which point, large numbers of people abandon the platform, customers get bored by it, and then we go into the real hard business.
Google Glass.
Yes, yes. And then we go into the real hard business of making these technologies really work and broadly applicable. The other construct I always look at, and this is one I am certainly guilty of, guilty may not be the right word, but I observe that I'm always way too optimistic about new technologies in the short term. But actually in the medium term, I end up being conservative. You know, Twitter, the most important platform you've never heard of, you know, and it took a while when I wrote that report. It's like people thought I was crazy, you know, and then we've reached the point where, wow, you know, what are the important platforms that are out there? You know, there are just a handful of them, you know, iOS, Android, Windows 10 maybe.
You know, so in terms of augmented reality, virtual reality, and this is probably a good topic for a full show or so. But the one, I read a really interesting article, and I can't, if it comes to me while I'm talking, I'll reference it. You know, there's talk about the impact of AI and how it's going to affect productivity, and then there's talks about, you know, universal income, and then there was an interesting, somebody had well, what do people do, and how do you keep people happy when they can't be productive because most of the work is being done by, and well, living in a virtual reality world. I mean, it's almost like the Matrix.
It is. I mean, that's a lot of ways what that movie.
It's a distraction. Yeah. No, so maybe the Wachowskis were smarter than we thought they were.
What do you mean? You didn't think they were brilliant from the get-go?
When they came out with the sequel, no.
I don't know. I thought the sequel was okay. I thought the third one, there's some.
All right, that's.
But that's okay.
Moving on. But now let's. But speaking of AI, and I know that you are a fan of your Echo. Alexa, reboot all. Alexa, turn off all the lights.
Yeah, Alexa, play "Pardon My Disruption."
There we go.
And Burger King, as we're referring to these home automation systems, and Burger King actually tried a commercial that invoked the Google Home device to provide information about a new Burger King promotion or product or something like that, and Google quickly put a stop to that. But yeah, I like my home devices, and I've got both an Echo and a Google Home device.
So are you ready for the new Echo?
The new Echo, complete with camera. So you've heard us talk about before where everything with a microphone is listening to everything we say, including Bose headphones, by the way. Isn't that an amazing one? That
the Bluetooth headphones.
Yes.
Bluetooth headphones.
Yes, the newer Bluetooth headphones that enable you to configure your Bose device are actually recording everything, ostensibly to give you a better experience, but it's amazing what they're learning from you. Well, Amazon's now got a device that incorporates the Alexa capability into something that has a camera, and I'll give them credit for shrewd marketing for playing on male insecurities to get this device and female insecurities to get this device into the home, where the first use case is you stand in front of the camera and go, Alexa, how do I look? And it critiques your haberdashery choices. I'm not sure there's enough computing power to.
I have like Disney. Alexa, on the wall. Who's the fairest of them all? I mean, come on.
Trademark that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. You've heard it here first.
Yeah, but this is the next vista with these intelligent devices. That they're hearing everything we say, they're seeing everything we can do, and if you want to be a supporter of these kinds of things, and I unabashedly am, I love having vision exercises where you sit there and say, what could I do with a camera that was always on, in addition to a speaker, into a microphone that was always on. I could build a set of exciting, interesting services and capabilities. And then there are okay, does that mean I have to get dressed in the dark in the morning, so as I'm not visible to my camera and my adoring fans?
Right.
Yeah.
All right.
And oh, by the way, I installed one of these home remote access cameras.
Yes.
We know that has an infrared or whatever it is capability.
So it knows when you come in.
No, well, it certainly knows that. You can set it for movement alerts, but it also works in the dark. So turning off the lights is not a protection. Yes, I'm deeply troubled.
Well,
it's a fascinating world.
Another aspect of AI that I want to talk about, and this actually inspired Esteban Kolsky, our mutual acquaintance Esteban Kolsky, wrote about how AI is about data, and that you've got a note here which I find I hadn't considered. When you start to capture data that you've never captured before, and then you start to think about questions that you've never asked before, because that's my philosophy. It's not about you don't know, information is not good unless you know good questions to ask, and it's actually putting some of our long-held assumptions on its head.
Yeah, and part of it, I was an economics major, and a lot of economics.
That explains a lot.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah, the dismal science.
They're all crazy.
The dismal science. Crazy. Yeah. it's set of economists. It's the only career you can have where you can have a full and active and lucrative career and never be right once. And there are several careers like that. Industry analyst is not one of them. But anyhow, well, I don't know. There may be some of my friends watching who are saying they're still waiting for that first one.
Right.
Although the analyst credo, though my opinion may have changed, the fact that I am right has not. So anyhow, economics and economic theory presumes perfect information. And perfect information means all sides of the transaction have access to full information. We are in a world now where that is far from the case. That the providers and marketers have a significant imbalance of information available to them and are starting to discover interesting ways on which to discriminate. There was a recent story, I forget where I saw it, about, might have been the Journal, where gas stations are actually using this information. It used to be the theory was, competition will drive prices down to a point, where they can eke out an appropriate profit margin, but there's incentive for them to lower their prices to a point where supply and demand balance and so on. But now what they're able to do is use information to understand people's buying patterns and go, I see what's going on. I don't need to lower prices now. In fact, their propensity to purchase on Monday is higher.
After a long weekend of driving, they're coming on Monday and they're going to buy it no matter what.
And oh, by the way, here's the current price at my competitors. So maybe I'll go up a penny or two a gallon. And then the gas station down the street discovers you've gone up a penny or two a gallon, and they think, oh, I've got a pricing umbrella because of my superior location. I can price a penny or two above them, and they leapfrog, and all of a sudden, rather than competition driving prices down, unbalanced information has driven prices up.
Now, I sense you're going to talk about another topic that we talked about downstairs. That was a pretty good show we did. There was another topic we talked about, and many times, because you talk about an imbalance of information and an imbalance in the marketplace, because that supply and demand for that economic theory to work, you have to have equal knowledge. So I just love the way you phrased it here, and I think you just need to say it that way.
Wither VRM. For those of you not familiar with VRM, I was invited to speak some years ago at another mutual friend, Tatiana Kanzavili. She asked me to talk about social CRM and the impact social was having on CRM, which is customer relationship management, which is the system marketers and merchants use to amass information about us so they can better serve us and or better price discriminate or whatever it is, more effectively capture information that's important to their business. I'm going to
excuse myself on that as well. Better serve.
You're running out of things
I know.
you can talk about.
That's right.
Yeah. Good thing you've got those boyish
it's
good
not
looks.
It's not the tools, it's how they're used.
Yes. That sounds like a Batman line. But VRM, the whole notion of VRM is instead of the merchant owning data about us and using it to better serve from their perspective, how about we own the relationship and have a willingness to share our information with merchants on a trusted fashion, providing that they're willing to adhere to a set of rules that enable us to make shrewd decisions. And it's been a technology, I've been talking about that probably as long as I've been talking about augmented reality. But unlike AR, which I identified in whatever it was, 2012, as one of the next disruptive technologies, I thought, is that the time for VRM? Is that the time for VRM? And I concluded, no, it's still early. I think the time is now, that we are at a point, and using the gas example, I believe it's Waze now, that Waze, the GPS system, that you can ask it to look for gas stations easily along your route, And one of the pieces of information that will come up with it is the prices at the various gas stations. So all of a sudden, if the merchants are playing games with, ooh, I can up the price, we customers will start to be able to identify that, here are the ones that are cheapest, and I'm going to alter my behavior patterns to favor those with lower prices, which signal should be picked up upon by the merchant.
But here's the thing. So VRM, it's either an open source project or where's the revenue model in VRM? That's the challenge.
That is absolutely the challenge, and that's why some of the things which started to look VRM-like in the early days, and you could even argue that that's what Facebook was predicated on. Let's share information in a valuable fashion. That's what Living Social and people of that ilk were predicated upon, and they discovered that, gee, we've got a great service, but the only way we make money is selling our data, so we're going to sell out our users. So yes, the business model is still unclear, but I think we're moving, there are a whole bunch of businesses these days where business models are moving to what we would refer to as a shared risk, shared benefit model. Rather than you've made some outrageous promises and I'm going to write you a big check based on your outrageous promise, when we both know you're never going to deliver on that promise, and we'll either live with your half-baked efforts, or we'll end up in some litigious environment. In shared risk models, it's like, okay, here's the benefit I think I can deliver to you. And if I really deliver that to you, I want a piece of the benefit. And I think there will be services like that
that's like my tax certiorari. The guy, at this time of year, if you live in Westchester County, you're going to get a letter from an attorney who says, I can save you money on your taxes. And they grieve your taxes, see if you can get it lower. And they get a percentage of what they save you.
Is that only a Westchester phenomenon?
I haven't owned a home anywhere else.
Oh, okay. Yeah, but I think that notion of I can save you money, and if I do, can I carve out a piece of it enough to make the business interesting? And I think that there are lots of opportunities to do that. Now, I don't want to downplay the challenges. Like, okay, one of the challenges is attribution. How do I prove that I delivered the value to you? Who gets the credit? How much did I really, but I don't think any of these are unsolvable. And I'm tempted to say that there are membership models. And there are instances where, okay, I will have a user-oriented thing where I charge you to be a part of this group. And there are tons of models in the offline world where this happens. You might even say a Sam's Club or somebody like that, Costco, is an example of something like that. So I think memberships online have some opportunity, but the uptake on those things, Jet.com is the latest big profile one that gave up on that quickly.
The multiples on the revenue are not good. Speaking of challenges with their revenue models.
Wow, this could go anywhere. There are a lot of people. Sears Roebuck? No.
No.
Snap. Yeah, I hope you didn't invest in the IPO.
I did not.
Yeah, because there are several issues they've got. Issue number one.
Well, let me take a step.
Okay.
Do you use Snap? Do you use Snapchat?
How old am I?
I didn't ask that. I said, do you use Snapchat?
Yes.
And you use it because you're curious to see how it's used?
Not even that. Right. You didn't ask how often I use it.
How often do you use Snapchat?
I think if they were counting MAUs, monthly average users, I probably use it once a month.
All right.
And usually because I've received a snap, I don't know that I've ever initiated one.
Now, my teenagers.
That's why I said, how old am I?
Use it every day.
Yep. And how do they feel about the notion of advertising intruding into that experience?
They are so used to the skip or wait. It's almost a blank in their mind. I think that our nations or the world's youth their brains are being rewired to be able to skip a piece of time and tune. I swear this is true. They know immediately on YouTube. They know that they know the difference between, some of them are 15 seconds you can skip, some of them you have to wait 30, and they just tune out and do something else, and then they come back. And I think that's like this, you know, for us it's time to go to the bathroom, right? Because you're watching TV, commercial comes on, you go to the bathroom, you get a snack. For them, it's a different, but they're tuning it out.
And hence another one of Snapchat's problems. Not only is user growth slowing, you know, if you're an advertiser, traditional forms of advertising will not work on the platform. Now, I think there are long-term opportunities for innovative types of solutions where they become content providers. And you know, if we, in some ways, what's old is new again. You know, in the 50s, why do we call them soap operas? Soap operas were sponsored by the detergent companies, you know, and they were actually significantly involved in content creation. And I think brands are going to get involved in that. But then we've got other problems, kind of this attention economy that works great. You know, there are a whole bunch of things online that work great when you're the only one doing it. When everybody else does it, you know, we've got the exact same problem we had before, you know, multiplied. And then add to Snap's problems is the fact that Facebook, with its, you know, billions of users, is adding those kinds of capabilities. You know, and Snap CEO Evan Siegel bravely said, well, just because Yahoo has a search box doesn't make them Google, you know, trying to dismiss Facebook's efforts, you know, in the space. And there are a lot of vendors whose epitaphs were, we welcome the competition from this large entrenched vendor who's entered our market space. You know, so there are a whole bunch of things where, you know, I think they've got a challenging business environment and no clear answers. And you know, while it's punishing in the stock market, you know, the question is, do we ignore the stock market? I mean, Facebook went down when it initially launched, and you know, look where they are today, around $150 a share, nearly 10x their, you know, low point in the market. And for Snap, is this early days and they'll figure it out, or is this a sign of something ominous? And I think slowing user growth is never good.
I remember when Amazon IPO'd, and this was in the 90s, and it wasn't clear what the revenue model for the internet was at that point.
And they were a bookseller.
And they were a bookseller, but it wasn't clear how to make money on the internet, and was it about eyeballs? And I think that, and it took almost, I don't know, 2 decades for really to mature. And that's the same thing we are with these quote unquote social platforms, that the revenue model is, they're still applying the old school revenue model, which is eyeballs. Yes. And
old forms of advertising.
And old forms, right. And I think that we're still nascent in terms of where we are with how to monetize that, or where the value is from that perspective. We talk about the internet a lot. It's one of our favorite things, and I think it's important to take a moment to pay homage to one of the founders. And we know we're not talking about Al Gore.
Bob Taylor. You know, a name probably many of you don't know. You know, he passed away within the last month, and you know, your joke about Al Gore and father of the internet. You know, and I'm always quick to point out that Al Gore did play an important role in the internet, but not on the technology side. On the technology side, there are really two people who deserve credit, for the internet and its underlying technologies. One of them, a guy by the name of Vint Cerf, who is still a wonderful market curmudgeon. Read his stuff, one of the most thoughtful people, and Bob Taylor. But Bob Taylor also, you look at the things where he was instrumental, and not only was he involved in the formation of ARPANET, the first iteration of the internet, he was also the head of Xerox PARC. And if you're not familiar with Xerox PARC, go Google it, kids. PARC, P-A-R-C, the Palo Alto Research Center. If you think of Xerox today at all.
And actually, if you're visiting or live near Washington, D.C., if you go visit the Science Museum, there's an amazing exhibit with some of the Xerox PARC stuff.
Yeah. And when you think of he says some of the Xerox PARC stuff, amongst things that got invented there were personal computing in some level, graphical user interfaces, Ethernet, the core networking technology.
And for those of us who lived through Choke and Ring, Ethernet is way better.
We could really geek out on that one. Yeah, but I can hear the sound of people clicking away.
Right.
And Taylor headed the lab there. So much of our modern computing infrastructure we owe to that man, and his passing is a notable event.
All right, let's get to some of our wind-up features. How about you have a very fun CUDA.
This is an unusual one, but shout out to Nintendo. In our overly litigious society, every product you open has 67 lines of fine print where you admit to all kinds of I accept all of this responsibility, and as a parent, the number of things you've seen, warning, choking risk, and it's like, what isn't a choking risk, and why do they have to put it on there, and what can be done about it? Well, Nintendo made the cartridges for their new Nintendo Switch console taste awful, so that if you put one of the ones in your mouth, you'll go and spit it out rather than swallowing it. And I think that is a simple, genius kind of thing that undoubtedly will save lives. Way to go, Nintendo.
All right. How about some interesting factoids? I think we can skip the first one because we already talked about that.
Yeah. Well, Apple is nearing $1 trillion in market capitalization. And the S&P 500, so by definition, if there are 500 companies on average, they're each 0.2% of the index. Apple represents 4% of the value of the top 500. Their concentration of power, they're larger than the economies of 45 of the 50 states. The only ones large are Illinois, Florida, New York, Texas, and California. This is a company that, for all we talk about its, product challenges and where's the next big thing, and they're lagging behind this, that, and the other thing. Boy, is that iPhone a wonderful franchise. And wait till the iPhone 8 comes out in the fall with pent-up demand. That who knows what the product's really going to look like, but the pent-up demand virtually guarantees, a blowout quarter.
All right, so Google Drive hosts over
No, we got to come up with some other gesture.
2 trillion files.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that's, if you're wondering, has the cloud made progress? Are we relying 2 trillion files? Now, that includes, probably of that 2 trillion, 1.2 trillion are selfies. It includes a lot of pictures, but even if I do that, that still allows for 800 billion legitimate files. Adoption, is massive. And I remember the days when you had to sync things to external drives or thumb drives, and all sorts of messy things. The cloud is a part of the computing landscape and essential.
So the other day, I got a text from each of my daughters during school hours. And the text said, "Remind me to tell you about what I did in health class today. I love you."
Is that troubling?
And so I said, okay. They came home. What they did in health class.
Did they do it independently or did they coordinate?
Independent. They're
Wow.
not in the same class.
Wow.
Independent.
Hmm.
And so they get home. I said, "What did you learn in health class today?" They were watching a video. And while they were watching a video, they were required to take it to text something to somebody and then go back and answer a question on what was in the video. And they failed. I mean, they missed what was happening. While they're typing, they missed what was happening. And this was their distracted texting exercise. I think that was brilliant.
That is good.
And they both said that they did not remember what was in the video.
Related to that, somewhat tangentially, is in the UK, part of the driving test now covers sat-nav skills.
Really?
Yeah. It's like, I guess it's assumed, turn the steering wheel, turn the left turn indicator when you're making a left turn. But given that there's so much technology in today's automobile, that having the skills to effectively utilize it and do so in a fashion that does not cause a distracted driving experience, the numbers of which are staggering. But they require sat-nav skill
That's why I
testing.
wanted you to talk about this one.
Yep. Drivers admitted to using their phones in 88% of the trips they drive. And I am guilty of that. And using doesn't mean talking and texting and so on. I'm doing things with my navigation system or flagging police in Waze and things like that. 88% of trips, and this is not some random somebody did this, but somebody who measured use among 3.1 million drivers over 6.5 billion miles. So this is a pretty great data sample. And stay away from Vermont. Users spend 7.5% of their drive there on the phone. So that
was the highest. Is that right?
Yeah, Vermont's highest. So I don't understand. I haven't seen. I could probably speculate as to why, but because maybe with spottier cellular coverage, they're always trying to find the GPS. Please update. Oh, I'm lost. Where do I make the turn? Because I don't have a cellular signal. Offline data.
So distracted driving is the same as drunk driving.
Yes.
Is the new drunk driving.
Yes.
But I'm telling you that my kids will never forget that exercise. It's pretty amazing. All right. Why don't you give us a quote of the month?
Well,
Doctor?
One of the regular viewers of our show, and I talk about her with some regularity, is my mother.
It's like Dave Letterman's mother.
Yes.
And again, that's how old we are, because nobody knows who David Letterman is anymore.
Yeah, although his mother passed away recently. Yeah. My mother, on the other hand, on Thursday turns 90. I'm going down to Florida to join my mother for that celebration. And the quote of the month is, you're getting old when your cake is not large enough to hold all the candles. but one of the things in researching what went on, I looked at what technology companies, my mother was born in 1927, what companies were founded in 1927, and there were 3 interesting technology companies that were founded that year. One of them is JVC, the audio maker, still around to this day.
Yeah.
One of them is a company, if you're deeply geeky, you may well remember the name Remington Rand. Remington, was the early typewriter manufacturer, and Remington Rand was the original maker of UNIVAC computers. So one of the early mainframe computer providers, Remington Rand, was founded in 1927. And the most interesting one in my mind is Fairchild Camera and Instrument. You know, and those of you who hear the name Fairchild, yes, that was the original company that became, among other offspring, Fairchild Semiconductor. And Fairchild Semiconductor is legendary in Silicon Valley. They were one of the earlier semiconductor companies, and virtually anybody who's anybody in Silicon Valley hardware history started at Fairchild Semiconductor. You know, all of the Intel Brain Trust.
Right.
And, yeah.
Right.
And,
That would be, that's an amazing incubator of sorts for all the technology we use.
Yeah, we talk about the PayPal mafia and so on the internet side, and but there may well be no company that spawned more innovation and success than Fairchild Semiconductor.
Wow.
90 years ago.
So thank you for joining us for Pardon My Disruption. We are here the second Friday of every month. Our next show will be on June 9th, and we hope to see you there. Until next time. We need a sign off.
Yeah, we can do it like pardon. Shout out. Good night, Canada.